Now, I asked Jeffrey to go backstage so Jennifer and I could talk openly about what she wants now without the intimidation and control of her husband sitting there at her elbow. Now, put Jennifer's picture up in that big screen, please. Just look at yourself. What do you see?
I see somebody in a lot of pain.
Go on, look at yourself.
Somebody who doesn't know what to do and doesn't know where to turn. And
doesn't she deserve better? Let me go through a list of things that I want you to hear and know. Number one, this is not your fault. Okay? This is not your fault. It's not your fault. Number two, it isn't fair. You shouldn't have to be dealing with this. You shouldn't have to be bundling your kids up and taking them to a shelter if that's what it comes to. You shouldn't have to be putting up with this. You didn't do anything to deserve this. It isn't your fault. There is no way he can justify his behavior by your conduct. This isn't your fault. Okay?
nice to hear somebody else say that.
Abusers abuse because of them, not because of you. This has nothing to do with you. Look, this is good news and bad news. The good news is this doesn't have anything to do with you. And the reason that's good news is therefore you don't need to blame yourself. The bad news is this doesn't have anything to do with you, which means you can't fix him. You can't fix him because it's not like, okay, if I'll just be a better wife, if I'll just be more loving and attentive and responsive, if I'll just stay pregnant the rest of my life, whatever, that wouldn't work.
No,
You've done it, right?
I've tried to, even against what I feel inside, I've tried to like hold his hand more and be nicer and to do nicer things so that he'll stop, so that he'll just stop. I know it's not me, and this is all way before I ever arrived that this stuff was in him, but...
This has nothing to do with you. This has to do with his anxiety, his lack of self-esteem, his fear about control. He feels out of control in his life and his world, and his thought is if he controls you, then he will feel orderly inside. This isn't love that does this. Do you get that?
I know that.
Then he may not even like you, I don't know.
I know. Well, I tell him that, and he'll criticize everything I do and say and how I act, but then he tells me, oh, I love you so much. And I said, you don't even like me. You tell me all the time, you don't like this, you don't like that. Why are you trying so hard to keep me when you don't even like me?
Do you understand how I'm answering that question? Why is he trying to keep you if he doesn't even like you? He is trying to keep you because you represent to him order in his world. If he feels like he's in control of you, then he has this misperception, this distortion that he is in control of the world. But while he's trying to control you, where's his business? In the ditch. Everything is falling down around him because he is focused and obsessed on you. The number one tool of the abuser is to isolate their victim.
He's done that pretty good.
They've got to cut you off. They've got to cut you off from family, cut you off from friends, cut you off from church, cut you off from the outside world, because then they got you. Okay?
That's what he's done.
Yeah, but he came here because in his delusion he thought he could control me. Don't you know that?
Yeah.
He needs help. He needs serious help.
I know.
And I'm trying to give him a wake-up call, as you can well see. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. If and when you do want to get out of this situation, you are no longer alone. Okay? Do you have a story or a question for me? Click the link in the description and tell me what in the world is going on.
Tonight, we confront a growing concern that many parents never thought they'd face. Are schools making life, altering decisions about children's identities without telling the people who love them most? This isn't about attacking anyone, it's about clarity. When a child goes to school, a parent assumes they are learning arithmetic, literature, and social skills. But now, some parents are discovering that their child socially transitioned at school without ever being informed. This goes beyond education. It touches the most private and sensitive parts of a child's identity and whether parents have a right to know. When a school chooses to affirm a child's new gender identity without alerting their parents, it creates a dual existence. During the day, the child may be referred to by a new name or pronouns, but at home they remain someone else. That division doesn't create safety. It creates confusion, secrecy, and emotional distress. What might feel like protection from the school's point of view can feel like betrayal to a parent trying to raise their child with honesty and care. Some institutions now follow a affirm first, ask questions later model. If a student says, "I feel like I'm a different gender," school staff are often instructed to immediately affirm it, without notifying the family. But children are still developing emotionally, mentally, and psychologically. Many are struggling with anxiety, peer pressure, or identity confusion. Blind affirmation without parental involvement may skip over deeper issues that require attention and support. We must ask, is it really in a child's best interest to navigate that kind of identity shift alone, under the guidance of a school counselor or teacher who is not clinically trained? No one is saying teachers or schools are trying to cause harm. Most are trying to do the right thing in very difficult circumstances, but they aren't psychologists or doctors. They're not equipped to make these life-impacting decisions without input from trained professionals and the family. What may start as a pronoun change could lead to decisions that have long-term effects on a child's mental health and emotional development. Parental consent and involvement isn't an obstacle. It's a vital layer of protection. Some schools defend these policies by citing student confidentiality, but consent isn't a checkbox or a legal technicality. When a child is dealing with serious emotional conflict, especially something as significant as gender identity, secrecy can be dangerous. Parents are often left in the dark until a situation escalates or unravels. At that point, it's no longer just a question of rights. It becomes a question of safety. A school cannot and should not carry that burden alone. This doesn't mean trans youth should be ignored or invalidated. Every child deserves to feel safe, seen, and supported, but that support must involve their families. Schools cannot replace the role of a parent, nor should they try to. If a child is truly in distress, the answer isn't to hide their struggle. It's to involve the people who know them best and love them the most. That's how real healing and understanding begin. We are long overdue for honest, respectful, and courageous conversations between parents, educators, and mental health professionals. These conversations can't be fueled by fear or politics. Some schools across the country are beginning to adopt policies that allow students to adopt new names, pronouns, and even identities during school hours without notifying their parents. This practice creates a hidden dual life for a child, one version that exists at school and another that exists at home. While the intent behind these policies may be to create a supportive environment for students, the result is often a confusing, fractured experience for the child. Keeping such profound identity changes a secret from parents is not a neutral act. It alters the family dynamic and erodes trust, not only between the child and the parent, but also between the parent and the school. The idea that a student's gender identity is strictly a private school matter misses the reality that identity development is a deeply personal, long-term journey, one that takes place across home, school, and community. A school does not operate in isolation from the family unit. When a student experiences emotional distress, confusion, or identity-related questions, the family is often the primary support system. Excluding parents from such important information effectively severs a vital connection that could help the child process these experiences in a healthy, grounded way. Treating identity changes as private school matters also assumes that a teacher or counselor is better equipped to handle a child's identity development than their own family. That assumption is not only unfair, it's dangerous. Educators may care deeply about their students, but they are not mental health professionals or family therapists. They don't have the full context of what that child is going through at home, what traumas may be involved, or how the family could be a valuable partner in helping that child feel whole and supported. Policies that encourage secrecy, even under the name of student confidentiality, can result in emotional harm and isolation. Children are placed in a position where they feel they must hide something from the people who have raised them. This may feel empowering in the moment, but over time it can turn into confusion, shame, and fear. Children are not emotionally prepared to maintain two versions of themselves. They may begin to internalize the idea that their identity is something to hide, or worse, something to lie about. Keeping parents in the dark also deprives them of the opportunity to show support, to learn, and to engage meaningfully in their child's evolving identity. It assumes parents will always respond negatively, but that's not always the case. Many parents are more understanding than schools give them credit for, and when they are given a chance to be part of the conversation, they can offer stability, love, and perspective that no teacher or policy ever could. Furthermore, this growing practice reflects a broader breakdown in trust between institutions and families. Schools are meant to partner with parents, not replace them. If the goal is truly to protect and support students, then open, honest communication must be the standard, not secrecy. A child's well-being should never come at the cost of shutting out the very people who have a legal, moral, and emotional responsibility to care for them. Ultimately, identity development is not something that should be managed in isolation by an institution. It is a deeply human journey that should involve all key parts of a child's life. Schools can play a valuable role, but they must work with families, not around them. Children thrive in environments where trust, openness, and mutual respect are present. When it comes to matters as personal as gender identity, collaboration, not concealment, is what truly protects a child. Many schools across the country have started to adopt what's known as Affirm First policies. These policies mean that when a child expresses a desire to identify as another gender, school staff are instructed to immediately affirm that identity without delay or further inquiry. While the intention may be to support the child and reduce emotional distress, this approach often skips over important layers of understanding that are critical to a young person's development. Children are not static in how they see themselves, and rushing into affirming an identity may overlook deeper, more complex emotional or psychological factors. Young people today are navigating an extremely confusing world. Social media, peer pressure, anxiety, trauma, and depression are all deeply woven into their daily lives. Sometimes a child's declaration of a new identity may be tied to these larger emotional struggles rather than a consistent or deeply rooted experience of gender dysphoria. By affirming without question, educators and administrators may unintentionally sidestep the opportunity to address those root issues and instead reinforce a temporary or emotionally driven decision as permanent truth. The Affirm First model assumes that immediate validation is the most compassionate response, but compassion is not the same as wisdom. True support means taking time, asking the hard questions, and involving professionals who can evaluate a child's mental health comprehensively. Not every child who expresses gender confusion is transgender, and not every student who seeks affirmation will ultimately continue down that path. To suggest otherwise is to ignore the evidence that many adolescents explore identities temporarily as they try to understand themselves and where they fit in the world. What's often missing in these situations is careful clinical evaluation. A child who expresses a different gender identity should not just be affirmed by default. They should also be offered the chance to speak with licensed mental health professionals who can guide them with expertise and empathy. Teachers and school staff, no matter how well-intentioned, are not equipped to make decisions about identity development that can carry long-term consequences. This isn't just about names or pronouns, it's about emotional health, psychological resilience, and long-term identity stability. Another overlooked element of Affirm First policies is how they can unintentionally isolate families. When schools make these affirming decisions without including parents, they fracture trust and eliminate the opportunity for open dialogue at home. Many parents are fully capable of handling their child's gender-related questions with love, patience, and care if they're given the chance. Cutting them out of the process implies that the school knows better, which only breeds resentment and deeper division. There is also a risk of normalizing fast-track transitions in environments where deeper exploration and reflection are needed. Once affirmation becomes policy rather than a thoughtful case-by-case approach, it sets a precedent that every child's declaration must be acted upon quickly. But some children benefit more from time, conversation, and counseling than from immediate changes to how they're treated socially. Without careful discernment, schools could be locking kids into paths they may later question, regret, or abandon altogether. Supporting children means being there for them not only in their convictions, but also in their uncertainties. Affirmation has a place, but it should not be the first or only step in addressing a child's evolving sense of self. Real care involves listening, understanding, involving the family, and leaning on mental health professionals. Children deserve support that is thoughtful, balanced, and built on a foundation of trust and communication, not fast decisions based on pressure or fear of being politically incorrect. Too often, when a child expresses confusion or distress about their gender identity, the response is to quickly apply a label. Whether it's through school policies, peer reinforcement, or social media influence, young people are being guided toward identifying as something new without deep exploration into what's really going on inside. While labeling may offer temporary relief or a sense of belonging, it can also act as a shortcut that bypasses a much-needed understanding of a child's mental and emotional health. Identity is complex, and for many children, it's tied closely to their environment, trauma, stress, and self-worth. Many of these children are not just exploring their identity in isolation. They're also experiencing anxiety, depression, peer rejection, family issues, or academic stress. In some cases, identifying as a different gender may be a way of expressing emotional pain or escaping pressures they feel unequipped to handle. Instead of slowing down and asking what's driving these feelings, adults often feel pressured to affirm immediately, fearing that hesitation might be harmful. But a reflexive label can obscure the deeper work that needs to be done to help that child truly understand themselves. A mental health approach to gender questioning should never start with assumptions. It should start with curiosity, compassion, and clinical care. This means creating a space where a child can talk openly about what they feel, what they fear, and what they hope for. It means assessing their mental state not just in terms of gender identity, but in a broader emotional and psychological context. When the only support offered is social affirmation, we miss the chance to help them build resilience, process trauma, or manage mental health conditions that may be playing a major role in how they see themselves. Labeling too quickly can also interfere with long-term emotional development. Children and teens are still figuring out who they are. They change their interests, beliefs, and identities often as they grow. When we place a fixed label on them too early, especially one with significant social or medical implications, we risk freezing them in a version of themselves they may later outgrow. The goal should not be to box a child into a label, but to walk alongside them as they figure out their path with the full support of professionals and family. Additionally, once a child adopts a label, it becomes harder for them to backtrack. They may feel pressure to stay committed to an identity, even if it no longer feels right, because they've already announced it to their peers or received affirmation from authority figures. That kind of pressure can lead to inner conflict, shame, or even more serious mental health struggles. A label should never become a prison. It should be a temporary placeholder that leaves room for change, reflection, and personal growth. We must also consider that mental health struggles can both influence and be influenced by identity concerns. The relationship is two-way, and ignoring that fact can result in inadequate care. A child who is depressed might find temporary hope in changing their identity, but if the depression is left unaddressed, the new identity won't fix the underlying problem. Similarly, a child grappling with bullying, isolation, or body image issues might believe that a change in identity is the answer, when what they truly need is support and self-acceptance. True mental health support means looking beyond the label. It means giving children space to speak, think, question, and feel without fear of being pushed in a certain direction. It means equipping them with tools to understand their emotions, not just attach identities to them. When schools and caregivers work together to offer this kind of support, children don't just feel seen, they feel understood. And that kind of understanding can be far more healing than any label ever could be. Teachers play a vital role in a child's life, often serving as mentors, supporters, and protectors during critical years of development. However, it's important to recognize that their training is designed around education, not therapeutic intervention. They are trained to teach math, history, science, and literature, not to navigate complex psychological issues or identity crises. While many teachers have big hearts and want to help students through difficult times, they are not equipped with the clinical expertise necessary to guide a child through life, altering emotional or identity-related decisions. When schools position teachers to handle matters of gender identity without the involvement of parents or licensed professionals, they place an unfair burden on educators. Asking a teacher to manage a student's transition, including using different names or pronouns in secret, requires them to make decisions that can impact a child's long-term mental health and family relationships. This is not only outside the scope of their job, it puts them in a deeply uncomfortable and potentially risky position. Most teachers want to support their students, but they shouldn't be put in situations where they are expected to act as counselors or therapists. These decisions also often come with legal and ethical complications. If a teacher agrees to socially transition a student without telling the parents, they may be violating school policy, district guidelines, or even the law, depending on the state. This places them in a legal gray area where their intentions could be questioned and their professional integrity challenged. In many cases, teachers are unsure of what they're allowed to do and are left navigating these sensitive situations alone. The pressure to do what feels right emotionally can sometimes override what is appropriate professionally or ethically. Furthermore, this kind of secret arrangement can damage the trust between teachers and parents. Families send their children to school assuming that any major issues, whether academic, behavioral, or emotional, will be communicated to them. When a parent learns after the fact that a teacher has been calling their child by a different name or pronoun without their knowledge, it creates feelings of betrayal and confusion. Trust is difficult to rebuild once it's broken, and secrecy, even when well-intentioned, can destroy the partnership between home and school that every child needs to thrive. Teachers are also vulnerable to emotional burnout when they are asked to serve roles they were never trained for. Carrying the emotional weight of a student's personal struggles, especially in isolation, can affect a teacher's mental health and effectiveness in the classroom. They are already expected to manage crowded classrooms, academic pressures, and discipline issues. Adding the responsibility of managing hidden aspects of a student's identity increases their stress and can lead to unintended consequences for both the teacher and the student. There is a growing need for schools to establish clear, consistent policies that define the boundaries of what teachers can and should do in these situations. Teachers should be supported in referring students to appropriate school counselors or mental health professionals when a serious identity issue arises. They should also be empowered to involve parents or guardians unless there is a clear and documented safety risk. Protecting a student's mental health should not come at the cost of excluding families from the conversation. The solution is not to make teachers into therapists. It is to recognize that emotional and identity-related issues require a team approach, one that includes educators, mental health professionals, and families. Teachers can play a supporting role, but the primary responsibility for a child's mental well-being should rest with trained experts and loved ones who understand the child's full history and context. Respecting teachers means not asking them to do more than what their role was ever intended to include, and respecting families means making sure they are part of the journey, not left behind it. One of the most important and often overlooked aspects of this issue is the matter of consent. Consent is not just a formality or a checkbox on a document. It is a deeply human agreement rooted in trust, communication, and understanding. When schools make decisions about a child's gender identity without informing or involving the parents, they are bypassing the very people who are legally and emotionally responsible for that child. This kind of exclusion is not a minor oversight. It is a serious breach of the family unit and a misrepresentation of what consent truly means. Parents are not optional participants in their children's lives. They are not merely observers, they are caretakers, decision makers, and emotional anchors. When a school decides to socially transition a student without parental involvement, it's not just making an educational decision, it's making a personal one. That level of intervention steps far outside the traditional boundaries of what a school should be doing. It suggests that the institution knows better than the family, which can cause deep mistrust and emotional harm. Some schools defend these actions by citing student confidentiality policies, arguing that they must respect a child's privacy above all. But privacy cannot be used to override the fundamental rights of parents, especially when a child is dealing with confusion, distress, or major changes in identity. If a child is experiencing emotional turmoil or questioning who they are, this should be a moment where families are brought closer together, not pushed further apart. The instinct to protect should never cancel out the need to include the people who love the child most. There are real consequences to this kind of secrecy. When parents find out that their child has been identifying differently at school for weeks or even months without their knowledge, the result is often shock, pain, and a deep sense of betrayal. It can fracture the relationship not just with the school, but with the child as well. A young person, placed in the middle of conflicting loyalties between school and home, may feel pressured to choose one over the other. That is a burden no child should have to carry. In some cases, parents are painted as potential threats simply for wanting to be informed. This assumption, that families will automatically respond with hostility, is both unfair and unsupported by evidence. Many parents are willing to learn, listen, and support their child, even if the process is difficult, but they cannot do that if they are deliberately excluded from the conversation. Respecting a student's privacy should not mean erasing the parent's right to be involved in their child's well-being. Consent is not about agreeing to whatever makes others comfortable. It is about understanding what is happening, asking questions, and making informed choices. When those choices are made behind closed doors without a parent's knowledge, the process lacks integrity. Everyone involved, schools, counselors, and families, should be working together, not against one another. Open dialogue and transparency are what build trust, and without trust, no system meant to support a child can truly function. Ultimately, true care for a child involves including everyone who plays a significant role in their life. That means respecting their voice, supporting their emotional needs, and also recognizing the unique role that parents play. Consent is not an obstacle, it is a foundation, and when it's treated as anything less, we fail the very children we claim to protect. We must protect all kids. There is a growing tendency in public discourse to frame any questioning of school transition policies as an attack on transgender youth. That framing is not only unfair, it's inaccurate. Wanting transparency, family involvement, and thoughtful mental health care does not mean anyone is against transgender children. In fact, it's the opposite. Real support means doing what is best for every child, whether that child is transgender, questioning, confused, or simply trying to find their way in a complicated world. Protecting kids means protecting all kids, not just those who fit neatly into a specific narrative. Every child, regardless of how they identify, deserves to be seen, heard, and cared for with patience and wisdom. It is not compassionate to push children down a path they may not fully understand just because it appears to be the most affirming response in the moment. Rushing children into new identities without deep exploration can lead to future confusion or regret. That's not protection, that's avoidance. True protection means creating safe spaces for children to explore their feelings while being surrounded by adults who are honest, informed, and accountable. Children are not miniature adults. Their brains are still developing, their emotions are still raw, and their sense of self is constantly evolving. What feels certain today may feel uncertain tomorrow. That's part of being young. If we move too quickly to label a child or place them into a new social role, we may be responding to a temporary feeling with a permanent solution. No matter how well intentioned the adults around them are, if those decisions are made without enough care or input from the family, the child may end up feeling even more isolated. It is also important to understand that there is no one-size-fits-all path. Some children do indeed benefit from being affirmed and supported in their new identity, and those situations should be handled with care and sensitivity, but for many others, a slower, more cautious approach is far more appropriate. Schools must create policies that are flexible and responsive, not rigid or ideologically driven. Protecting kids requires us to consider the individual, not just the issue, and that means involving everyone who knows and loves the child, not just one part of their world. Too often, policies are created out of fear of lawsuits, fear of backlash, fear of offending, but decisions made in fear are rarely sound. Protection rooted in fear often leads to secrecy, rigidity, and overcorrection. What children really need is protection grounded in wisdom. That means policies that are built on trust, communication, and professional guidance. It also means understanding that sometimes the most loving response is not immediate affirmation, but careful, thoughtful support that includes the people who raise the child. Children thrive when they know they are safe. not just physically, but emotionally and relationally. That safety comes from knowing that the adults in their life are working together and are genuinely invested in their long-term well-being. When parents, teachers, and mental health professionals collaborate, the child receives balanced care. That's how true protection works, not by isolating people, but by bringing them into the process with love, respect, and open eyes. If we are serious about protecting all children, then we have to take a step back and evaluate what we're doing. Are we listening to each child as an individual? Are we including their families? Are we willing to slow down and ask hard questions, even when it's uncomfortable? Protecting all kids means being willing to do the hard work, not just the easy, politically correct thing. It means putting children before ideology, honesty before fear, and healing before haste. Policies that are created without genuine conversation between schools and families tend to breed mistrust, division, and resentment. When decisions are made behind closed doors and presented as final, parents are left feeling sidelined and powerless. A school is supposed to be an extension of the community, not a separate authority operating with its own hidden agenda. When that connection breaks down, parents begin to question everything, from lesson plans to staff intentions, and that lack of trust becomes toxic to a child's learning environment. Education policies, especially those concerning identity, emotions, and personal development, should never be made in isolation. They should involve open forums, honest dialogue, and a willingness to hear opposing perspectives. When schools avoid these conversations because they fear backlash, they often end up creating even more of it. Silence breeds suspicion. Transparency, on the other hand, creates space for understanding, even when people disagree. Families want to feel that they are part of the process, not just passive recipients of mandates. The belief that certain discussions are too delicate or controversial for parents to be part of is deeply flawed. Parents may not always respond with immediate agreement, but they bring valuable insights into who their children are and what they need. Excluding them from these conversations implies that their concerns are irrelevant or unwelcome. That kind of dismissal does more than hurt feelings. It creates real barriers to collaboration and shared responsibility, which are essential to helping a child grow. When schools act unilaterally on sensitive issues like gender identity without establishing clear lines of communication, the fallout often impacts more than just one family. Communities become polarized. Rumors start to fly. Parents begin pulling their children out of public schools. The narrative shifts from education to control, and students are caught in the middle. What could have been handled with care and openness now becomes a public conflict that hurts everyone involved, especially the kids. Trust is not built through secrecy or surprise. It is built over time through honest, respectful engagement. When schools take the time to explain their policies, listen to concerns, and offer a space for dialogue, they earn credibility. Even if disagreements remain, the process itself reassures parents that their voices matter. They may not like every policy, but they are far more likely to respect it if they were given a chance to participate in its creation. The same is true for students. Children and teens learn a lot by observing how adults handle complex issues. If they see teachers and parents working together through disagreements, they learn how to communicate, compromise, and grow. If they see one side shut the other out, they learn that division is acceptable and that fear is more powerful than cooperation. Schools are not just places for academic instruction. They are models for how society works. If we want better outcomes, we need better examples. Ultimately, meaningful policies require meaningful conversation. Schools must be willing to explain what they're doing and why. Parents must be given a real seat at the table, not just a notice after decisions have already been made. When we start treating each other as partners instead of obstacles, we begin to rebuild trust. And trust is the only foundation strong enough to support a child's emotional, social, and academic development. Without it, no policy, no matter how well written, can truly succeed. Many schools are acting as though identity issues must be addressed immediately, with urgency and instant affirmation. But the truth is, identity is not an emergency. It is a journey. When a child expresses uncertainty or a desire to explore their gender, it should not trigger a crisis response. Instead, it should open the door to reflection, conversation, and guidance. Fast, tracking social transitions or making quick policy decisions does not always come from a place of understanding. It often comes from fear of being wrong, judged, or seen as unsupportive. Children and teenagers change rapidly. Their views, preferences, and even sense of self can evolve from month to month, sometimes even from week to week. This doesn't mean their thoughts and feelings aren't real, but it does mean they need space and time to grow. Responding to identity questioning with immediacy and formality might lock a child into a version of themselves that they're not yet ready to claim permanently. What they need most is patience, not pressure. There is a fundamental difference between listening to a child and immediately acting on what they say. Listening means giving them room to talk, feel safe, and be honest about their experience. Acting, too quickly changing names, pronouns, or school records without careful evaluation, might feel supportive, but it can unintentionally communicate that these feelings need to be resolved immediately. This rush denies the child a chance to process their emotions and explore without expectations or conclusions. We don't treat other aspects of identity or development as emergencies. When a child expresses career dreams or religious doubts or goes through emotional ups and downs, we give them space to think it through. We encourage them to talk to trusted adults, seek guidance, and sometimes even revisit those thoughts later with a clearer mind. Gender identity should be treated with the same depth and care, not as a race to change, but as a process of discovery supported by understanding adults. Slowing down does not mean rejecting or invalidating a child. It means taking their feelings seriously enough to walk with them step by step, rather than rushing ahead without a map. It means involving mental health professionals who can assess not just gender questions, but the broader emotional and psychological context. It also means involving families who can offer love, insight, and continuity that no institution can replace. A thoughtful pace allows everyone involved to be more responsible and more compassionate. The fear of getting it wrong has led many schools to assume that speed equals safety. But moving quickly without adequate evaluation or communication can be just as harmful as moving too slowly. Children can be unintentionally pushed into long-term decisions that don't match their long-term needs. Giving them room to explore, change, and even reverse course is a sign of respect, not hesitation. They deserve support that is not reactive, but responsive, built on care, not compliance. Taking a calm, measured approach also reduces the pressure on the child. They don't have to feel like their identity needs to be finalized immediately. They don't need to feel like they're disappointing anyone if they change their mind. By treating identity as a personal and evolving journey, we show children that they are more than a label, more than a moment, and more than a decision made too quickly. This is the real way to support them, with wisdom, patience, and the time to grow. We are living in a time where discussions around gender identity, education, and parental rights have become deeply polarized. Emotions run high, and many people feel forced to choose sides rather than engage in honest, open dialogue. But now, more than ever, we need courageous conversations. We need people who are willing to speak with clarity, not cruelty, with conviction, not condemnation. These conversations are not about winning arguments. They're about protecting the emotional and developmental health of children who are caught in the middle of a very adult debate. It takes courage to ask difficult questions without being labeled as intolerant. It takes even more courage to listen to uncomfortable truths without shutting down or attacking the person speaking. Families, educators, mental health professionals, and policymakers all need to come together with a willingness to understand, not just to be understood. Everyone involved wants what's best for the child, but each person may have a different view of what that looks like. If we can't sit down and talk about those views, we can't find common ground. Schools must be open to hearing from parents who are concerned about being excluded from key decisions in their child's life. That doesn't mean parents are trying to micromanage every detail of a school's operations. It means they want to stay connected to their child's growth and challenges. Likewise, parents must be willing to understand the pressures educators face and the guidelines they are required to follow. These conversations won't be easy, but they are necessary if we want to avoid further breakdown in trust. Mental health experts must also be part of the conversation. They bring the knowledge and insight needed to help both families and schools navigate the complex emotional landscape children are going through. But even they need to recognize that no mental health approach can be effective in isolation. When professionals, educators, and families work in separate corners, the child is left unsupported in the spaces in between. Collaboration is the key, not just coordination, but genuine collaboration where everyone's role is respected. Children are not served by silence or secrecy. They are not protected by policy decisions made without their family's input. They benefit from consistent, united support from all the adults in their lives. That can only happen when communication is prioritized over ideology, and when people stop talking past each other and start listening for understanding. We need to drop the fear of being misunderstood and instead lean into the possibility of building bridges. These conversations must also happen in communities, not just in institutions. Churches, youth groups, sports teams, and neighborhood organizations should feel empowered to talk about these issues openly and respectfully. When adults in a child's life are having courageous conversations, they model for that child what it means to engage with honesty and care. They show that you don't have to be afraid of disagreement or discomfort, and that tough conversations are not a threat. They're a pathway to stronger relationships. In the end, it's not about one side being right and the other being wrong. It's about building a culture where children are not used as symbols in a political battle, but treated as human beings in need of guidance, love, and truth. That only happens when we choose to speak up and also choose to listen. Courageous conversations are not optional. They are the path forward, and every child deserves adults in their life who are brave enough to have them.